everyone, I'm Avni and welcome to another exciting episode of Alumni Connect series, where we dive into the journeys of our distinguished alumni who've carved unique paths across various fields. Today we have a truly inspiring guest, Mr. Saksham Samarth sir, from batch of 2011 of Hidayatullah National University. Mr. Samarth is an international sports lawyer who has worn many hats in the world of global sports and governance. He has worked as a Pro Bono Counsel at FIFA, served as a senior associate at One BB Partners, and currently holds the position of safeguarding disciplinary tribunal matters at One World Series. Welcome to this interview, sir. It's been an honor to have you with us today. And
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, sir. So we'll divide this interview into various sections, and we'll firstly start with delving into your life at HNLU and how you found this field, this very niche field, and how you discovered it. And so let's start from the beginning. We would want to know what was your life during your time at HNLU, and were there any specific experiences or incidents which nudged you towards this field of sports law?
So during HNLU, or rather I would say back then in India, there were not many options to pursue a career in sports law. So my time in HNLU was fairly good. I was not very active in terms of studies, but I was very active in moving and towards sports in general. And I've had an inclination towards sports ever since I was a kid. So I always had the idea to combine sports and law in the long run, but not immediately like during my time at HNLU or right after it, because I could not find the appropriate opportunities. I think I graduated in 2016. Back then, there was just one firm specializing on commercial aspects of sports law, and they were not focusing on dispute resolution or the areas in, let's say, football law that I wanted to focus on. So that was not even an option for me to go for an internship, because they completely specialized in an area I did not want to enter into in terms of sports law. So when I finished HNLU, after graduation, I was working in taxes. And that's when we had a couple of other sports law firms that came in India. And these were students from other national universities who had gone outside India to pursue a master's or an LLM, and they had come back and started their own firms. So that's when I got to know about some masters across the ones that I could at least look at as an option to pursue a career in sports law. So that's how my journey started. I was doing taxation, indirect taxation, and I did not really like it or did not see myself doing that, at least for a longer part of my life. And then the idea to combine sports and law was a natural choice, in the sense that I felt doing a master would be the best option, because the regulations in sports federations are very different than national laws. Each sport or each federation has its own set of regulations, and they're completely disconnected to national laws of countries. So it was a natural choice that maybe studying something into this area before trying to, pursue a career would make sense. And that's how I started looking at options, started speaking to people internationally to see where I could go to pursue a career in sports law.
So actually, that's a very interesting point, because one of the things that after talking to a lot of students, we realize is that the people are very unclear regarding to the secondary education that they can seek if they want to pursue a career in sports law. And that brings us to another section of our interview, where we want to understand what are the academic or professional steps that are involved if one wants to work in this field, and how does one become an international sports lawyer? What kind of master's degree can you pursue, or can you get a diploma in sports law?
So even today, there are very limited options to pursue a master's in sports law. It's like, as you mentioned earlier, it's a very niche field. unlike all other areas of law that we come across during the 5-year course, this is something nobody specializes in India, and outside India, it's also not a traditional LLM. Like, unlike if you go to universities in the UK or the US where you have concepts of professors coming in, like professors teaching you, in sports law all over the world, you will have lawyers and arbitrators who practice in this area who will come and teach. So I went to ISDE in Spain. They have 2 branches in Madrid and Barcelona, and it's considered to be one of the oldest programs and one of the most reputed programs. The concept is very simple, that within the course of 6 months that you are there for your first semester, you will have probably 50-60 different people coming and teaching you, all of who are practicing within the world of sports law across different sports. And then you have a second semester, which is an internship. They help you get an internship. Of course, it can convert to a job and it may not convert to a job, but it's also something you decide that you explore different areas once you're there. But so I went to ISDE in 2019, and my perspective now has slightly changed in the context of the Indian market, that pursuing a secondary academic education like a diploma or a master's in sports law may not be a necessary step to gain an entry into the market. And I will tell you why, because I get a lot of queries from people saying that you've gone to ISDE and you're working outside in Spain, and how does this interact with people wanting to do masters from the UK, from Australia, from US, or in Spain. In India, we have leagues for so many sports now, and there is a lot of work in all of these leagues because most of the federations do not know how to run their legal affairs, their administration, their management. So as a lawyer, of course, some aspects are necessary that if you have an interest, you can already start. Like, everything is available online, the kind of rules, regulations they have to follow from international federations, the directives. A lot of things are made public even by different firms across the world who practice in sports law, what kind of work they do. So you have access to resources. It's a long journey, of course. As a lawyer in any field, you need a lot of years of hard work. You need to put in weekends. There's no concept of time as such. You need to put in those years of effort. But in India, because the market is so big right now, it's also possible that you start not necessarily in law, but in any area of sport across these leagues, and slowly you can automatically navigate into the legal side. Because even today in football, in rugby, in kabaddi, these guys don't have specific sports lawyers who can give them advice. A lot of them are continuing to go to traditional law firms, and at least football is slightly different. So when it comes to matters related to football, because the industry is so specific, that a lot of traditional law firms also cannot always be of help because they don't specialize. So even football clubs and players in India now at least have access to lawyers across the world, and they prefer hiring lawyers across the world. But again, it does not mean that us as Indians do not have that market open to us. So it's a balance. Like, of course, any higher education is an asset, but you also need to be very clear as to what you want after pursuing an LLM or a master's degree.
Right, sir. So I think it's very interesting what you mentioned, especially about the sports law field in India opening up and the opportunities that we have in the domestic field. Because I think another hesitation or some reservation that many students may have is that in order to pursue a field in sports law, they'll have to sort of go international or go to a different country. So I think this is another aspect that I would want to discuss with you and the scope of sports law in India. But just before we touch on that topic, could you just tell us, like, what are the basics of sports law? Because for many students, it's a very niche and unexplored topic. So, what exactly is sports law, and what does your work entail as an international sports lawyer? What are the legal issues that you deal with, which could be contracts, arbitration, topic, ethics? So, if you could explain a little bit about this.
So on a daily basis, like I'm an international sports lawyer at a firm called Uno One Legal in Valencia. Along with this position, as you mentioned earlier, I have a position as a pro bono counsel in FIFA and a safeguarding disciplinary tribunal member at wholesaling. So I'll tell you my roles across the three fronts, and it's quite different in the sense that in terms of laws, as I mentioned, the regulations are very different. They're disconnected to national laws. But whatever we have studied, let's say in HNLU or what you practice legally, all those concepts are applicable. Like contracts are bread and butter for us. A lot of labor and employment law, administrative law, corporate law. When we deal with football clubs, or for example, consider any football club, at the end of the day, it is a company which has been incorporated in a country and it has to follow those corporate structures and regulations of that country. So ultimately, all of these entities across different sports are companies as such. So you need to be aware of those set of rules and regulations to begin with. Every time you sign, like you have a football player playing for you or a coach or any sponsorship agreements you have, these are all contract laws. We deal with a lot of intellectual property in terms of trademarks and copyrights, in terms of image rights of football players, collective rights of the team altogether, of coaches individually, players individually, like how companies across the world go insolvent and bankrupt. We have similar issues across football and other sports where football clubs would go insolvent, would go bankrupt. So how in corporate setup we deal with the concept of legal succession, in sports we deal with the concept of sporting succession. So and it's applicable to all sports. So for example, a basketball team or a Formula One team, anyone could go insolvent or bankrupt. So in from that perspective, one specific area of law that would be of immense importance, of course, is contract law. But other than that, every day is very different because you don't know what area of law you may have to deal with along with a particular issue. Now in sports, the idea is to have dispute resolution done in arbitration. The Court of Arbitration for Sport is based in Lausanne, Switzerland. I think after the Vinesh Fogart matter last year, at least a lot of people in India now know what court all of our disputes go to, and that is across sports. So the International Olympic Committee recognizes, and all international federations across the world, no matter where they are globally headquartered, they recognize the Code of Arbitration for Sport as the main final dispute resolution body. So from that perspective, arbitration becomes a factor if you want to work in the dispute resolution side. So all of my cases or my firm's cases in a first instance level are dealt with that particular international federation, and on appeal you go to arbitration in Switzerland. Now, working internationally, the only extra additional aspect that I had to focus on apart from the federation regulations was Swiss law, because the arbitration happens in Switzerland. So Swiss law comes into play, and a lot of international federations are headquartered in Switzerland. So they draw inspiration of their own regulations from Swiss law. So that is probably the only national law that we have to be very particular about. Other than that, on a daily basis, we have a lot of disciplinary issues, doping matters, ethical issues, cases on racism, sexual harassment. Now, for example, in my role as a pro bono counsel of FIFA, so there are I think 20 pro bono counsels across the world that FIFA has appointed for a period of 4 years. So my tenure started in 2023 and it should run until the end of 2026 or sometime in 2027. So a lot of FIFA has its own set of disciplinary and ethics regulations. So in disciplinary regulations, they are bound to sanction players for violative conduct, abusive conduct, clubs for unruly behavior of the supporters, or if somebody is abusing someone, there are a lot of physical fights. Similarly, in ethics, the idea is to control all the officials that form part of the football family, from clubs to national associations to confederations. So a lot of times I am appointed by FIFA in cases to defend the accused, where he or she might have been accused of sexual harassment, mismanagement of funds, forgery, falsification, racism. So that is a role where usually these accused have held higher positions in confederations. And once these proceedings start, they stop responding to FIFA and they are kind of absconding. But once again, like even though they are accused of very serious crimes, you have to give them legal advice and legal guidance. So this is where FIFA kind of contacts us and hires us for those specific cases, and these are pro bono cases. And these are very complex legal issues involved, but at least the accused is given a right of defense through, and we are independent third parties. So I work with a firm, so I have no whatsoever contractual relationship with FIFA, and it's the same for all the 20 members who are there. Are 20 of us from around the world, and there is a lot of help that these people eventually end up getting, and it's also FIFA's efforts to try and sanction these people, or at least have a fair process to also get justice to the victims. With respect to world sailing, so safeguarding as a concept is also aimed at educating all the athletes in terms of very simple matters such as doping, sexual harassment, how people should behave with each other at workplaces. And sailing is slightly a different sport where you spend a lot of time on the ocean with a very small team. So a lot of athletes, and we are in 2025, but it's very surprising to say that in terms of educating athletes about their own rights across sports, we are way behind across the globe. So that is one aspect that they're focusing on right now as world sailing, to give them a lot of education, to know what are their rights, to know about rules and regulations. And same goes for doping. Like I'm sure a lot of you would be reading very frequent news articles in India, because athletes in India, or India is probably the second biggest country where most positive doping cases turn out to be. And when we represent the athletes, it's very important to know how the prohibited substance entered the athlete's body. And the biggest challenge in India is that athletes do not have access to resources other than cricket, maybe now football. They do not make a lot of money, so it's difficult to hire a nutritionist, have a doctor, have people to guide you how to train, what to eat. So these are some of the challenges, and this also brings me back to my earlier point that the market in India is wide open. But again, then when it comes to doping, I'm also entering into scientific matters, learning about specific medicines an athlete might have taken which contains a prohibited substance, to then domestic regulations of that particular country, where what does the Drugs and Cosmetics Act say, or each country has its own regulations on medicines. So then these are aspects then you have to enter upon. And with sports dispute resolution, a major chunk of cases do involve witnesses. So we do engage in a lot of direct and cross-examination of various kinds of witnesses. So that gives a bit of a very different angle, or let's say what a lot of criminal lawyers or people in general in our profession do across the world. So they mix of so many things. So like each day is very different.
Right. So I think it's a very dynamic field as per my understanding, because there are a lot of cross of many different issues and many different sects of law, if you could describe it as such. So the next point that we would want to know about is exploring through internships. You mentioned that there weren't and that many internship opportunities that you could pursue specifically in this field. However, if students do wish to intern in this field, should they aim to intern with sports firms or sports federation or arbitration institutions, or can they even maybe go for events such as IPL or ICL internships in such events? Can they also be a relevant opportunity?
So I would say one, before choosing an internship, it is very important if you know as a student what could be a long-term goal or which area you want to explore in sports. So at least I would say for students who are in fourth or fifth year, or even immediately when you graduate, because you have a lot of time to try different things, my suggestion always would be to try interning with a firm, try to intern with a federation, league. Like you could do multiple internships just to see what you like the most, and then you start like narrowing down, because a lot of times it's very difficult, and I do get these questions that people who are immediate graduates or students who immediately graduate, it's very difficult to narrow down at the age of 23 or 24 that I just want to do this. So it's more important to explore. And now in India, you have these many leagues. Every sports has a federation in India, a national sports federation. And now you have at least, I would say, 4 or 5 very good firms in India who are doing different kind of work. So one or two specialize in dispute resolution, a couple specialize in doping, 2 or 3 specialize on the commercial aspects, regulatory aspects, financial aspects. So you may not get a lot of international exposure with these firms, but at least you get a very good idea of what they do and where you fit in, or what you like and what you don't like. Like as I mentioned, when I was in HNLU, there was a firm, but I knew they do not specialize in an area I would want to specialize in the future. So for me, it was not a very viable, let's say, internship option. Also because we had challenges back then from the university that we could not get access to internships anywhere in the country. But for somebody exploring, it's very important. And again, I would say that even jobs in sports law are very less because we work in very small teams, unlike corporate firms. But it's also okay if you start in, let's say, a management or an administrative position, because you being a lawyer, they will always use that as an asset in your favor. So ultimately, you will slowly navigate to the legal side. But it's very important, because I also have a lot of lawyer friends from different parts of the country who now specialize in the management side, or somebody is an agent in athlete management and athlete representation from an agent perspective, or they're working in the sponsorship setups. So these are things that people just discover despite being lawyers, that there are other areas within the sports industry that intrigue them more.
Right. Thank you. So finally, coming back to discussing the scope of sports law in India, what is your current take? What is your take on the current scope of sports law in India? And do you see the growing potential of this field with more leagues and federations getting formalized? And what do you think are the challenges that are faced by young sports lawyers in our country?
So I think the scope is very good. As I said, even if I compare it from 2019, when I started my journey in sports law, to now, things in India have revolutionized in a very dramatic setup. All the national sports federations who are affiliated to international sports federations have got more access to international exposure from these international federations. And now you have these national sports federations doing a lot of domestic sports development across the country. Of course, in terms of results, I would not say we are there. We may take another 15-20 years when you compare the Olympic results to other countries. But in terms of scope of work from both sides, there is a lot of work. And again, these national sports federations do not have well-equipped people to know how to run their affairs. They are also learning on the go. So for students, even if you want to work, as I said, in any area within the industry, there is a lot of potential in the market out there. And it's okay, you will not very actively see them putting out internship opportunities or job opportunities, but it is a two-way street. Like you approach them or you can offer them something, and there will always be a dialogue and they would respond, because they also need it's a two-way street. These federations can exist only when they have very good people around them. So they need a lot of young talent, and they are on constant search. Like it's for example, now Rugby India is starting a league. They have formalized something. I think Rahul Bose was having a conference a couple of days ago. He made a couple of announcements. You see ISL, like the top tier football league in India, which started in 2014. Reliance has taken over. You have now 11 or 12 football clubs. Each of these clubs need people in many areas. Then Reliance is doing a lot of development across states all over the country. They are running a lot of programs. They need people there. So it's happening across sports. It's just that people are very inclined to limited opportunities or limited areas where they want to work. And it's worth exploring the entire market as such. So there are a couple of agencies now who are very well established in India, who work even with athletes from across the world. So even though they are based in India, there is an opportunity to work with them, and everybody needs a lawyer at the end of the day. So the market is growing, and now with India willing to bid for the 2036 Olympics, and we are having so many World Cups. I think probably every alternate cricket World Cup more or less is happening in India. So even though cricket is a slightly closed market, but with IPL and with domestic cricket, there is scope for a lot of work around there.
Right, sir. So you mentioned the nature of work that you deal with in FIFA and World Seeding, these organizations. Could you also explain to us how did you come across these opportunities? Is there a typical application process, or is it referrals or networking? What is the structure of employment in the sports law field?
So I would say two aspects. One, that since 2020 I've been working with the same firm. Like last year we just rebranded. So I've had a lot of cases against FIFA, or cases where FIFA has generally been involved and seen the kind of work all of a sudden. It's a small industry internationally. Sports law right now is a very small industry. More or less everybody knows everyone. So I think one of the factors would be that they would have seen my work over these years, because in a lot of CAS arbitrations I have been against FIFA, and a lot of other cases that, as I said, all first instance football cases started FIFA. So when we submit a claim before FIFA, they get to review documents and they decide in a first instance proceedings. So they do get to analyze law firms and lawyers from across the world. The same thing happens during CAS arbitrations, that even when FIFA is proponent counsel or is like a second or a third respondent who may not be the main party, but they do get access to see who is doing what kind of work and what areas do you specialize in. So I would say that would have been one of the factors. Two, of course, there is an application process. After every World Cup cycle, FIFA issues an application, rolls out an application. People from all over the world can apply. Preferred candidates would of course be one with experience, two with specialized sports law experience, because they know that you will be appointed in very sensitive matters. So you need to have background in those kind of cases to be able to defend the accused in a proper way. So for me, I think a couple of these things would have played out, and it does that, like in any other area of law, I've always been advised to keep writing articles, keep going to seminars, attending conferences. You learn a lot from these events. You get a chance to network with people, you get a chance to know people. Of course, all of these things do make a difference, because for them to accept your application, they also have to know you. So, and you never know, because it's like people from all over the world apply, and there's a FIFA council who sits and decides. And of course, I feel happy and fortunate that I was selected, and it's a very good position to have, in the sense that the kind of cases I get assigned are something which I don't do on a daily basis. So But yeah, it's like you get a couple of these ethics matters, maybe 2 or 3 a year, and then you get to work on these high profile cases. It does make a lot of difference. And it's the same with world sailing. Like, because we are doing something specific in world sailing, I think my previous appointment at FIFA and my experience in, I would say, doping matters, in matters relating to ethical issues in general in sport, did play a role. So, and in there, I will have to wear a very different hat, because there it will be me along with 2 other judges. We will have to decide on cases. So, of course, one part of, as I mentioned earlier, one part of the thing that we're doing right now is imparting education to athletes. But eventually, in world sailing, my role is as a judge. So, whenever I am appointed, I am supposed to rule on these whatever legal issue or disciplinary issue they have in relation to athletes.
Right, sir. So, can you mention and share with us any of your memorable or challenging cases that you've dealt so far in your career?
Yeah, so I would mention a couple of them. Maybe back in COVID, at least people who follow football, maybe I don't know if people remember the incident, but they could relate to it. In December 2020, there was a Champions League match where a referee was accused of racism, and the match had to stop inside 10-15 minutes. And I was watching that match back home with a couple of friends, and the very next day when I got to office, I found out that we are representing the referee. And on Twitter, there was almost a media trial. People had, like, the online abuse that guy had faced inside the span of 12 hours was just unbelievable. And our primary objective was to make everyone understand that he comes from a background where all the referees, the kind of language they were talking in was not English, and they are allowed to communicate in different languages if you speak different languages. And to have him uh, defend on the aspects of racism, and we were successful in evidencing that the kind of phrases he had used in the context of that match did not did not amount to, let's say, a discriminatory behavior or a racist behavior towards the players and the officials. So that was one of the most satisfying cases that I did, and that was very early in my sports law career. So that was one. Two, I would also say, since the Russia-Ukraine war, has been very, very much involved in a lot of cases that concern war. And those cases have been quite challenging, because ever since you're a kid, you've always been hearing about conflicts, and you read it on the news, and then things pass, and something that does not directly affect you, it's in your subconscious mind, but you let go of it because it's like not impacting your daily life. But then with this war, we've had a lot of cases from both sides, and that is only when you realize the impact it creates, not only on the livelihood of so many people, but because I work in sports, I also have to think a lot from an athlete perspective, or a football club perspective, or a sports organization perspective. So those cases have also been very, very challenging, because rules have been changing constantly, and all the international federations also have to evolve when such incidents occur. So it's not like you have a lot of precedent, and at times I've been on cases where those are one of a kind dispute that was never brought up in the history of sports law. So it's again very challenging to be, but at the same time there's a lot of learning involved. So yeah, I would say these are a couple of incidents or cases that I consider as the highlight so far.
Thank you, sir. I think those are all very fascinating experiences to hear. So coming to the last and final leg of this interview, is a question that we ask all the guests that come on here, is if you could go back and give one piece of advice to your young self in college, what would that be? Something that all the students can also keep with them as a reminder.
My advice to my younger self or to all of you would be one, at least, like, do not feel that anything that you do immediately after HNLU would be permanent for the rest of your life. It's okay to keep figuring out things, and you may take longer time than, let's say, other people or your friends or your peers. And like, follow your dreams. I would say, very late in turning to sports law. I had a lot of opportunities around me between 2016 and 19 when I graduated in India, which I did not take. And I consider myself fortunate that I went to East and I have something right now. And I do something I really like. So I could have taken these chances back then. And it's something that all of you can do in whatever field, or even, I have friends who've completely stopped or do not want to do anything in law, and they've pursued different things. So when we are in usually fourth and fifth year, there's always a sense of, fear that I want a PPO, or I want a job at this firm, or I want to do this, I want to do that, and you want things for immediately. And of course, it's good in the short run, but that may be something that does not define what you do for, let's say, a larger part of your life. So it's okay if you figure out things slowly, but do take small steps towards what you want to do, even if it's something very different. Like, when I pursued sports law, I did not have a lot of guidance. I did not have, let's say, college seniors or even people in India that I could turn out to. I found out 2 or 3 students who were doing the same program as me 1 year before me. They were the ones who guided me a little, and they are like very good colleagues and friends right now. And we are 4-5 people from India working in different parts of the world. And we did not have a lot of people to look up to. But I do realize that, as I say, there's so much to do in the sports industry. I should have done something, because that was my ultimate, let's say, dream or goal. So it's something like, you guys, like, whatever you want to do, take that plunge, do it. And it's never late. But don't be in that constant fear that, if I don't get a job after 5th year, or once I'm finishing HNLU, it's going to impact you in any way. Like, it's for the shorter run, but in the longer run, you will eventually figure out what you want to do. So because I always had a lot of my batchmates back in 2015 and 16, that everybody was, running after certain jobs, and we were like, a lot of anxiousness around everyone in the batch. But now, when you ask any of my batchmates, people are so comfortable in their lives, and a lot of people are doing different things than what they had started back in 2016. And eventually things do work out, but yeah, you have to be diligent, consistent, and willing to take the risk. So one who's taken a lot of risks, I would always encourage people to take risks. So it's like, you can do something which nobody else is doing. It's okay.
Right, sir. I think this would be reassuring for a lot of us, especially in our 4th and 5th years. Thank you so much for this interview. Thank you so much for taking out time. It was a pleasure to hear your answers and hear your perspective on a lot of these questions. I think it would be really helpful for a lot of students who are aspiring sports lawyers, or anyone who is starting up in this field. If you have any other last words, you would like to wrap up this interview. Thank you so much, sir.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me and for your time. And yeah, everyone, budding sports lawyers, I think there's a lot of courses happening around. So I would suggest that you could sign up for these courses. They're not very costly. So it would also kind of give you access to the market. You can get to know people, be relatively active on LinkedIn. And people, if you have some knowledge and interest, like, write articles. You have a lot of platforms in India that help you write articles, publish articles, and would not really bother if you are a student. So everybody can write, and when you write, you have a lot of learning, because you're putting out something in the public. So it's it's a lot of learning there. And yeah, this applies to like all other fields also, not specific to sports law. But yeah, that's all from my side. All the best, guys.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.